Good afternoon, everyone. Josh with Severe Weather. Happy Wednesday to you. We continue to track Hurricane Rafael, which has strengthened significantly since this time yesterday, now approaching major hurricane intensity and moving into Cuba here as a dangerous storm. We're going to talk about what has changed in the forecast and also other potential issues coming up here in the tropics beyond. But big changes today in our track, and a lot of it has to do with how strong the area of high pressure that's going to build into the northern Gulf ends up being here in a few days. And we're seeing a lot less support for something coming up to the United States Gulf Coast this weekend and early next, and a higher likelihood the system stays farther south and is able to maintain some intensity because it'll be missing the stronger wind shear and the cooler waters to the north. So again, there's still going to be some changes here, but things are definitely looking different than this time yesterday. And part of it has to do with how strong our system is. And you can see I'm projecting it to stay over the central and southern Gulf of Mexico as a pretty significant hurricane into the beginning of next week. After that, a lot more uncertainty here. Mexico could be impacted. The system could stall. It could even drift northward and eventually get killed by wind shear. So we still have quite a bit of possibilities here coming up later this week into next week. But right now, the focus is on Cuba and the effects of this dangerous storm over the area that it will be tracking here in western Cuba later today into tonight. Beyond that, we do have the possibility of a tropical depression or even a low-end tropical storm forming near and north of Puerto Rico Friday and Saturday, and that will head towards South Florida, but probably not going to be a big deal in Florida other than maybe some rain and moisture at this point. Right now, the wind shear is probably going to be too high for this to be a significant system, but something we need to keep an eye on. The next name on the list is Sarah, and beyond this, we have a signal for maybe additional potential development in the Caribbean later next week. Here's where we've been for this hurricane season. You can see the area that this storm is going has been hit before by Debbie, but it has avoided a strong storm here this season so far. This part of the Gulf has been hot, and we continue to have action here as our storm Rafael is going to be tracking into that general direction and likely to be this is our 11th hurricane of the season, likely to be our 5th major, so definitely above average. And you can see from the National Hurricane Center, I don't have the 1 o'clock up outlook yet. I can come back to it, but we do have a 20% chance of development here in the next 48 hours, 30% as we get towards the weekend, as low pressure is expected to form near the northern Leeward Islands by tomorrow morning, and then could gradually develop as it tracks close to the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico and eventually towards the southeastern Bahamas. But Rafael is really the only major threat at this current time. Here's a look at the tropics, and you can see here Rafael still strengthening as it approaches Cuba here, just east of the Isle of Youth. Pretty good outflow. There is a weak upper level trough that is lifting away to the north and west of it. You can see we've got a boundary here across parts of the south. Some pretty significant rain expected this afternoon and tonight across portions of central Georgia into the Midlands of South Carolina. And some of that rain, of course, is needed, but it is hitting areas that were hit hard by Hurricane Helene. Elsewhere, we've got a flare up here and a bit of a weak circulation just north of the Leeward Islands. It doesn't look like much, but wind shear is beginning to back off some. So we do need to keep an eye on that over time as it generally heads in this direction here. And we do have a new tropical depression in the eastern Pacific, which could get eventually upgraded to Tropical Storm Miriam, but not going to be much of a system as it's going to be encountering a hostile environment. Here's a closer look at the Caribbean, the two areas to watch. Obviously, your eyes get pointed to Cuba here with Hurricane Rafael. The Gulf is actually fairly quiet, especially west of Florida. Dry air in place for the time being. And you can see here, we do have our disturbance that is beginning to flare up across the Virgin Islands and eastern Puerto Rico and the northwestern Leeward Islands. Some heavy rain expected here in the coming days. And you can see that here as well. In fact, I'm going to bring up the upper level for you all to see what's going on. Here is the water vapor image, and you can see here circulation in place here, but it's mainly at the mid and upper levels. Nothing yet well-defined here at the surface for the time being. And we do still have quite a bit of dry air north and west of this system, so it's got to fight that dry air push and going to take some time before it can potentially develop. Here's a look now at potentially Hurricane Category 3 major hurricane, very close anyway, Rafael. And I'll take a look at the intensity as we get our new advisory coming in during this video. You can see here that it's not a very big storm, but very well defined. We had a cleared out eye earlier, still a pretty well defined eye as it approaches the coast of Cuba here towards this evening. Here's a closer look, and you can see there was a cleared out eye earlier east of the Isle of Youth. Our storm center now about here, just passing to the right of that, and we'll be moving over the skinniest portion of western Cuba. Havana's here, so the system is going to come just west of Havana, and you'll get heavy rain and potentially tropical storm to even hurricane force winds in Havana here this evening. But this will be back into water here later this evening and overnight over the warm waters of the southern Gulf. After that, expecting a turn to the left, but the outer bands, as you can see here, are going to reach the Florida Keys this evening, and there will be a threat for a little bit of severe weather and certainly some higher storm surge and heavy rain as well. We are seeing much better weather across Jamaica today, the Cayman Islands and central Cuba, though, getting crushed with heavy rain. As you can see, these bands here, these higher cloud tops producing some incredible amounts of rain, which is not uncommon this time of the year. Here's the radar from Grand Cayman, and you can see our center of circulation right here. There's a well-defined eye wall. The pressure continues to fall, and the dry air off to the south and west has not really been getting into the center and weakening it, but there may be some fluctuation in intensity as the system makes landfall. There could be a bit of an eye wall replacement potentially starting here. So we're going to wait and see what the aircraft are showing for that. But either way, this is going to be a pretty intense storm system. So flights early this morning showed the pressure dropped more than 10 millibars in a few hours. That was certainly not good to see because that indicates solid strengthening here. And then the flight after that saw the pressure continue to drop, albeit at a slower rate, down to 965. And we've got aircraft that are circling the center as we speak. The latest pressure looks like it's down to about 956 or 957 millibars, which is borderline Category 3. I'm waiting to see if there's any new data. Here we go. The latest data came in, and you can see wind speeds on the eastern side of the storm. Actually, there's really two wind maxima, so there may be two eyes trying to form here, or at least the inner one going away and the outer one taking over, meaning our storm's going to get bigger eventually. But you can see these wind speeds are now up to over 100 knots. So we are probably looking at a Category 3 at this point. You can see graphically here, the wind speeds are right at about 100 to 105 knots. So we're very close to Category 3 intensity for the time. And you can see that the eye is very warm as well. With the dew point in the mid-teens Celsius, that's 50-some degrees at flight level. So the eye is definitely warm, meaning we've got a pretty mature system at this point. So where's the system go next? Well, you can see here, the worst of it's going to be over the water here this afternoon, and then by this evening, the storm is making landfall 4 or 5 o'clock here. It is now trending west of Havana. There's been a leftward shift, but we continue to have hurricane warnings for all of western Cuba, tropical storm warnings for central Cuba at this point. But you can see the bend to the left here from the Hurricane Center's latest forecast, and no longer putting Louisiana in at least the next 7-day outlook here. So this is a significant change in what we've seen. And you can also see from the National Hurricane Center, and there it is, 115 mile per hour, Category 3 hurricane. So they are showing a major hurricane until landfall and then gradual weakening, but still a pretty intense storm here as this moves into the Gulf. Now, yesterday, if you remember, our forecast point at 7 a.m. Saturday was somewhere up in here, and on Sunday was somewhere up in here. Now we've seen that idea get thrown out, basically. I mean, there's still an uncertainty level here, but generally speaking, the system will be moving west and maybe even trying to track more south and west at this point. And our time frame has continued to get pushed back. So this could still be a storm in the Gulf in 6 days from today, which would be quite a difference in what we've seen. Here's the storm surge forecast. That has not changed due to the track here. We are going to see a few feet of storm surge flooding in the Keys. Obviously, significant storm surge across parts of western Cuba. Here's the timeline on when winds could be stronger. And if this even tries to threaten Texas, it wouldn't be until later in the weekend. But I don't think necessarily a direct hit on Texas. Our key messages here, really we're talking about the intensity of this that's going to bring in some threatening storm surge east of it and the wind damage that will go through western Cuba this afternoon and evening. But we're also taking a look at very heavy rainfall and obviously uncertainty as we get into the later part of this forecast by the weekend. We do have a 5% chance for tornadoes in the lower Keys, a 2 to 4% chance in southwest Florida, including Monroe and parts of Collier County and even parts of Miami-Dade, and obviously across the Florida Keys as well. So let's take a look at what has changed here. Here's the GFS model from the midday run. And you can see that track more to the west. And here's the reason why. See this area of high pressure here? It continues to build westward, stronger than what it was forecast to be a couple of days ago. And so we've got this big wall that's basically been built here to keep this from moving northward. We do have a powerful system that's bringing snow to Colorado to bring snow to northwest Texas. Tomorrow, while we've got the tropical system in the Gulf, I guess that's not uncommon in November. But the difference here, if you go back and look just 2 days ago, is that ridge 2 days ago was supposed to be east of Florida. Well, today you can see how much farther west it's shifted. So that is putting up a barrier of protection, a hedge of protection here across the northeastern Gulf of Mexico. And over time, there's a lot more uncertainty. The GFS shows wind shear getting the best of this system, and whatever's left of it gets sucked up. But other models are actually stronger with the high pressure ridge and keep the system farther south. And next week, that ridge builds right back into the Gulf, so we do get some protection there. But underneath it, we have some tropical activity potentially in the Southwest Caribbean once again here in about 8 or 9 days. Wind shear. This is something we've been monitoring very closely. Even though the Gulf is cooling off, it's warm enough in the southern Gulf if there's low wind shear for this system to survive. And you can see here where the jet stream is posted here, there is going to be somewhat of a favorable right entrance region of the jet here in this area and here. So even though the system is down in here, it's going to have some outflow off to the north and east here, allowing it to maintain some intensity. You can see there's an upper level high here and an upper level high down in here. So if the storm is up here, it's getting those stronger winds aloft, but if it stays farther south, it's going to be under what's called an anticyclone, which allows our systems typically to maintain their intensity here. So just a big shift in what we saw yesterday. Look at this huge jet coming in early next week, but the GFS says this is going to avoid it now. It didn't show that a couple of days ago. It didn't really show that yesterday. Ocean heat content, it is coming down. You can see the storm has gone over very warm waters here over Little Cayman and now east of the Isle of Youth. But as it comes out and moves in this direction, there's still some fairly warm water in place. Not as warm as what we've seen today, but warm enough to support a hurricane. So if the system comes up in here, it basically loses that warm source. But if it stays down here, it still has that source in place to keep intensity here. So our ensembles from the GFS have shown everything shifting west. Yes, there are a few solutions going into Texas and Louisiana, but generally speaking, this may drift westward and get stuck or even continue to drift towards Mexico here, if this is correct. The European is farther south. It, in fact, has stronger solutions in the southern Gulf, almost doing the reverse of Milton. Remember, Milton came out of this area and moved in this direction. This is almost going in the reverse direction, which is what you would expect this time of the year. Milton was a little bit of an oddball for sure. And then here are our tropical models, and we don't have really any support for something coming up in here anymore. That option basically off the table. In fact, we may have something that's either stuck here or continuing to track southwest, which is a new idea from what we had yesterday. So, in fact, all of our tropical models, the HWRF, the HAFS, and the HMON have this now making that southwest track. And this is still a pretty warm part of the Gulf of Mexico. So we are definitely going to have to adjust our forecast here. Intensity forecast, well, we are at Category 3 already, so we're already here. But we will see a little bit of weakening here as the system goes over Cuba, but not a lot. You can see there's a window for this to continue to be at least a Category 2, if not Category 3 storm across the southern Gulf of Mexico for a few more days. And the HWRF and the HAFSA actually show this getting close to Category 4, and the result of that being stuck farther south in the warm southwestern Gulf. Now, that's not a big threat to the U.S., obviously, or even Texas, but it is something we need to be watching in Mexico. But we have some of these other models continuing to bring it into wind shear and into cooler water. So either it's weak and going north, or it's stronger and heading southwest, or in between, it's gradually weakening, heading westward. All those options are still there, but my forecast has been adjusted in favor of the hurricane models. Here's the European model. And you can see the European brings some dry air in west of the system. Initially, it fights that off here right into Friday. You can see our storm is actually still pretty intense. As we get to the weekend, though, you can see eventually that dry air is going to be in the way of this system here. And the big question mark is, can the center hold together? The Europeans got it as a Category 2 hurricane. It doesn't even have it there today. And in a few days, it does have it as a category 2, but look at all this dry air. So it could still avoid all of that, but it's going to have an uphill battle to do so. Here's the HWRF tropical model here, and this is where things have changed significantly. The storm weakens for a little bit and then starts to gain back some strength here on Thursday night as a 957 millibar storm and drifting west-southwest into a favorable part of the Gulf. You can see the pressure does come up a little bit here, but then goes right back down. It goes through a phase where it weakens and then re-strengthens into warmer water. I do want to kind of show you here as well. This is the other feature we're tracking here. Look how weak it's going to be. And oh, by the way, not to get people riled up here, but look at this. We've got another area of low pressure beginning to spin up here later this weekend into next week. It's not strong, but it is something there. So anyway, can we say Patty, Sarah, and Tony? Maybe, maybe not. But that's what the models have been indicating. Here's a closer view of the HWRF for you all to see. Some weakening, but then it gains strength right back here on tomorrow, and the pressure drops tomorrow night. We have another phase of intensification, and then the system begins to turn left and heads west-southwestward. And this is not the only model showing this, by the way. I'm going to show you a few more, but it actually has this heading down towards Veracruz early next week as a Category 3 hurricane. Here's the HAVS model. This is the A version. It's actually doing a good job of forecasting this in the short term. You'll see it weaken some and then rebuilds its intensity back to Category 3 strength here tomorrow night, and then heads westward here right over the Scorpion Reef, which just narrowly avoided the worst of Milton last month. And then you can see the system continues west, and look at that, 950 millibars. That would be a high-end Category 3. And then even 945, that would be Category 4. And again, this could be too aggressive, but look, it's done a pretty good job so far. You can see eventually that pressure comes up and this weakens to a Category 2, maybe even a 1 as it approaches Mexico here early next week. Here's the last HAVS model, just to show you all here. We don't want to HAVS, yeah, anyway, a couple of different HAVS models here, but again, same idea, strengthening after it hits, heading westward. This one back to an intense storm, again, 946, 937, that's Category 4 solidly, but it's not there for long. This is a small storm, so as it gets into drier air, look at this. It's already back to a tropical storm and then re-strengthening to hurricane intensity and then making landfall. But you see the point here. We've got really all of our tropical models no longer even bring this north of 25 north. They head it back to the southwest, which if you're in the U.S., this is what you want to see. Here's the icon model real quick here. And you can see kind of the same thing. It's hinting that it heads southwest, but it does not get pushed all the way down by the ridge. It kind of sits out in the Western Gulf and eventually falls apart. By early next week, it's gone at that point. You can see also our feature here coming through Hispaniola is not super intense. It's a brief, maybe depression at worst, and then it's gone. And this model is not indicating anything that will boil up here early next week in the Southwest Caribbean. And here's the Canadian model. And let me get it loaded for you all here. Whoa, I don't know what happened there. But you can see here, the Canadian's obviously not strong enough on intensity, but same thing as the icon, but it does take the leftovers north towards Louisiana still on Sunday. But this is really, really weak at this point. It's weaker than what's coming through the Bahamas. So I'm not super worried about you in Louisiana. I think you'll get some rain, but I'm not super worried about that. By the way, here's the next one. The Canadians got it in the same place here as Rafael, but instead of going into the Gulf, it has it heading towards Cancun. Listen, that's 10 days away, and that's probably going to change quite a bit. All right, so let's look at the ensembles here. I want to see what's going to happen next because we're not done after Rafael. Here's our next feature, mainly staying south of Florida and then falling apart in the Central Gulf early next week. Here we go with the GFS showing more, actually two potential systems here. And I don't know if it's going to play out exactly that way, but it is showing more trouble in the Caribbean by next weekend here that we need to watch. Quite a few different solutions, and at this point, it's really a guessing game, but nonetheless, we are probably not finished just yet. Here's the European model, and you can see it is a lot less bullish on developing our feature near Puerto Rico here. It does show some lower pressures in the Western Caribbean, but as always, it seems to be much less aggressive than, say, the GFS ensembles. So this one has 50 different versions of the forecast, and none of them has anything really getting up into the northern Gulf. So that's what we like to see. Here's a Canadian ensemble system here, and it's more developed with our system moving into the Bahamas over the weekend. And then you see it's already firing things up here early next week, south and west of Jamaica. So a lot more aggressive, kind of like the GFS, but a little closer to land than the GFS, as you can see here. So I will not be finished with the tropics and the videos here next week. I was thinking I might, but we're not there yet, unfortunately. All right, here's the operational GFS real quick. And you can see, rather than going west, it's still trying to pull the system northward by our front here. And I don't think that's going to happen at this point anymore. But what you can see here is the system never makes it to Louisiana. The moisture sneaks up there Saturday and Sunday, but it just never makes it up there. In fact, the wind shear kind of kills it here, and you've got basically just some cold leftovers by the time we get to next Wednesday. Here's the Canadian model real fast. And I think I showed this to you all earlier, but I'll show it to you again real quick here. It does pull this up to Louisiana, but that's like a tropical depression for Sunday morning. And then it's very quickly lifting out by our front here. So anyway, we've got time here, but we're buying more time on the Gulf Coast basically at this point. All right, real quick, Tropical Depression 14. This could become Tropical Storm Miriam tomorrow, but it will be there briefly according to this. Here's Mexico. It's not expected to be a threat at this point. You can see it's looking pretty sheared at the moment here. Here's our forecast models showing that southeasterly track, a pretty unusual track, by the way, but it is still possible this time of the year. And intensity forecasts don't really get it past low-end tropical storm. We do have a much bigger issue, though, across the northeastern Philippines. Cayugan here, we have 115 mile per hour, very strong typhoon. So 2 Category 3s, one hitting the Philippines, one hitting Cuba at the exact same time. That is very unlucky. You'll see this will weaken eventually as it pulls away from the Philippines, but this is going to be a nasty storm, unfortunately, for these folks. Take a look at the infrared. You can see it's slowing down, which is never good either, meaning the amount of rain that falls is going to continue to increase as the storm takes its time moving through the northern portion of the Philippines. And that landfall will be Friday around late morning, local, or Thursday, Philippine time, and then it pulls away on Friday, and then the leftovers head towards Vietnam. So I appreciate everybody's time. This forecast can still change. I'm going to make that very clear to folks. We've seen there's a lot of uncertainty in the longer term here. When you've got steering environments that collapse, when you've got strong jet stream energy to the north and very warm water to the south, you get a very uncertain forecast. So I appreciate y'all bearing with me as I go over the possibilities with you. But for now, I have gone ahead and jumped on the tropical models. I think they've done a pretty good job here. And I'll be back tomorrow with more updates for you all as this system pulls away from the Florida Keys and makes its next move. So as always, I appreciate your time today, and I hope everybody has a wonderful Wednesday. As always, I want to give all the honor and glory to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I am a scientist, but I believe God has given me this gift. He's given everybody an assignment, and this is mine. It's to help other folks out, but I also believe that I could not do that with my Lord and Savior. And there's a lot of anxiety out there today, especially with all the election results coming in, and that's fair. But I think when we realize that God is still in control and it's not political powers, then that can take a lot of anxiety away. Knowing also that one day when we're no longer here on earth, we can be eternally living with Jesus in heaven. And Paul tells the church of Philippi this exact thing, Philippians 4, 6, and 7, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Prayer, thanksgiving, and peace. This is November, Thanksgiving. It's a time for us to be thankful no matter what is going on. Prayer, it's a conversation with God and saying, God, I don't know what your plans are, but here's what I'm asking. Here's what I want to thank you for. It's all up to you. I'm not going to put my faith in human beings who are going to let me down. I'm going to give it to you, Lord. And peace, knowing that eternally we've already been saved if we so choose to believe that. So I just wanted to encourage you all today with that news. That is the good news. And I hope you all have a wonderful Wednesday. Catch you again tomorrow. Take care.